Pennies from 1976, 1995, 2000, and even 2012 might be worth more than just 1 cent. Rare mint errors, double dies, and hidden varieties could turn these coins into valuable treasures. Like and subscribe now, you could be holding a penny worth hundreds. In 1976, the United States stood deep in celebration of its bicentennial, honoring 200 years of independence with fanfare, fireworks, and a remarkable surge in patriotic spirit. The U.S. Mint, swept up in the national fervor, struck millions of specially designed quarters, half dollars, and dollars commemorating the occasion. Yet amidst this surge of national pride and specially minted coins, the humble Lincoln cent carried on unchanged in design, with its iconic portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse and the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse, quietly serving its role in everyday transactions. At the Philadelphia Mint that year, over 4 billion pennies were produced, with no special edition to commemorate the bicentennial. For most Americans, the 1976 cent was utterly ordinary, blending into the sea of copper coins that passed hands every day. But history has a strange way of hiding its greatest secrets in plain sight. Among these billions, a few rare errors emerged, so rare that most went unnoticed for decades. And it wasn't until a careful, quiet collector in Oregon stumbled upon one that the numismatic world was reminded just how valuable the unnoticed can be. Miles Warren, a retired science teacher and lifelong coin enthusiast, had spent years attending estate sales, antique shows, and coin club meetings. He preferred obscure finds and undervalued oddities over flashy purchases. In the spring of 2020, he purchased a cardboard shoebox filled with old coin rolls at a garage sale outside Eugene. The box was dusty, forgotten, and priced to clear. To others, it was junk. To Miles, it was a trove of mystery. He brought it home, poured himself a cup of tea, and began what he called his favorite ritual, roll hunting. Roll after roll produced nothing special. Until he cracked open a dull paper wrapper labeled 1976. Inside were 50 copper coins, most scratched, tarnished, or nicked. But one coin sat just a little higher in the roll. He plucked it out, and instantly, something felt off. The coin's surface shimmered oddly under the light, less red, more golden, almost brassy. He flipped it over and immediately noted that the reverse was only partially visible. The Lincoln Memorial was skewed, barely centered. The top portion was cut off at a sharp angle. He held it closer under a loupe and saw what collectors fear to misjudge and hope to confirm, a dramatic off-center strike. The coin had been struck with significant misalignment, a rare error that could only occur when the coin blank, known as a planchet, fails to properly seat in the collar before the die strikes. But there was more. The texture of the coin was different. Lighter. He placed it on his precision scale. The reading came in at 2.94 grams. Not drastically off, but lighter than the expected 3.11 grams for a full copper cent from 1976. This weight discrepancy puzzled him. Could the coin have been struck on an incorrect planchet? Had the alloy been misapplied? He tested its magnetic properties. No response. He tapped it gently on the table. The sound was soft, hollow. Something wasn't right. Rather than jump to conclusions, Miles contacted a regional coin expert he'd met years before at a convention in Portland. The expert, intrigued by the photos Miles sent, asked to see the coin in person. A week later, Miles drove across the state to meet him. They examined the coin together under magnification, referencing coin catalogs and mint error databases. The conclusion was sobering and electrifying at once. The coin had been struck off-center on a defective copper-zinc alloy planchet, likely intended for a foreign contract or a misprocessed U.S. blank. And, crucially, it had survived in nearly uncirculated condition. The two men discussed the implications. Error coins from the 1970s were not uncommon, but one from the bicentennial year, bearing such a significant off-center strike, paired with a possible composition anomaly, was rare in the extreme. While error coins in modern minting are usually caught by machine sensors or human inspectors, the sheer volume of coins struck in 1976 meant that a few mistakes were bound to slip through. But this mistake, with its combination of elements, was not just rare. It was nearly unheard of. Miles sent the coin to a top-tier grading service. After weeks of anticipation, the coin returned, slabbed and certified as 1976 1C, major off-center strike on defective planchet, $58 Australian. With that authentication, its rarity was no longer speculation, it was fact. News of the coin's discovery spread across collector circles. Online forums buzzed with debate about how many of these 1976 error cents might exist. Some suggested a mint experiment with foreign blanks in early production runs. Others believed the error came from a batch of poorly mixed metal, causing a subtle shift in weight and tone. A few scoured their own 1976 rolls, hoping lightning would strike twice. In the months that followed, two more 1976 cents surfaced with unusual features, one with die clash marks so pronounced they imprinted part of Lincoln's coat on the reverse, another with a double die obverse visible in the "In God We Trust" motto. Though impressive, neither rivaled the boldness or precision of Miles's off-center strike on the defective planchet. That coin remained the standard by which all 1976 penny errors were judged. As the market absorbed the story, dealers began to whisper values. Early offers trickled in: $9,000, $12,500, then $18,000. Miles declined them all. He wasn't ready to part with his find. For him, it was the culmination of decades of careful collecting, quiet nights, and garage sale patience. But in late 2022, a private collector in Chicago approached him with an offer backed by provenance research, media attention, and verified bidding interest. The coin would be placed in a major auction, with full promotion as the featured modern error. The auction arrived in early 2023. Bidders filled the room. The coin's image was displayed on a large screen, its peculiar golden bronze tone and dramatic off-center strike shining under controlled lighting. The opening bid was $20,000. In a matter of minutes, it reached $48,000. By the 10-minute mark, the bidding was locked between two elite collectors. The price climbed steadily: $64,000, $71,000, then $88,000. Gasps filled the room when it broke six figures. At $124,000, one bidder hesitated. The other raised a paddle without blinking. Final bid, $136,000. The hammer fell, and history was sealed. A 1976 Lincoln cent, dismissed by most as a common coin, had just rewritten what collectors thought was possible from a year dominated by quarters and dollars. Today, the value of the very rare 1976 US 1-cent penny ranges from $55,000 to $138,000 depending on condition, strike detail, and the nature of the error. And for those willing to look closely, at the edges, at the weight, at the shadows between details, the smallest coin may still hold the biggest surprise. The mid-1990s brought no radical change to the US 1-cent coin. The Lincoln Memorial design remained intact, a steady emblem of familiarity amid an otherwise evolving world of coinage. The year 1995 was no exception. Mint production churned with predictability, producing over 6 billion Lincoln cents that year between the Philadelphia and Denver facilities. To the average observer, each of those coins looked identical: copper-plated zinc discs stamped with the ever-serious profile of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse, and the dignified memorial on the reverse. But buried in that massive flood of coinage, a few unexpected pieces emerged, ones that would one day ignite debates, investigations, and quiet bidding wars among collectors who knew exactly what to look for. Most of the 1995 cents were ordinary. But in a twist that took years to unfold, a small batch of Philadelphia minted coins began surfacing with an almost imperceptible irregularity. The first whispers started in the hands of casual collectors and small-time dealers. A few noticed it when the light hit the obverse just right. The letters of "Liberty" and "In God We Trust" shimmered unnaturally, as though a second, ghosted image lingered beneath the surface. It wasn't die wear. It wasn't a weak strike. Something else had happened. And it was just convincing enough to send some collectors to their magnifiers, holding the coin at odd angles, squinting for proof that it wasn't just their imagination. Among those people was Derek Malone, a meticulous collector from Missouri. He had no aspirations of becoming famous in the coin world, but he was known in his community for his careful eye and encyclopedic memory of known error types. Derek spent weekends at coin shows and weeknights studying reference guides and auction records. One rainy Tuesday evening in 2002, while sorting through a bulk lot of 1990 cents he had picked up at an estate sale, Derek spotted the gleam of doubled letters. It wasn't dramatic, but it was undeniably there. He didn't react immediately. Years of careful discipline had taught him that coin illusions are common, and overeager speculation often leads to disappointment. He set the coin aside, finished sorting the rest of the batch, then returned to it under a microscope. That's when he saw the truth: the doubling wasn't just random. It was systematic. Every letter of Liberty appeared twice, slightly shifted. The motto, "In God We Trust," showed the same effect: crisp, clean, and distinct. Even Lincoln's eye seemed oddly shaped, as if caught mid-movement. Derek's heart pounded. He knew what he was looking at. This wasn't machine doubling, which creates shelf-like shadows. This was true doubling, the kind caused during the die creation process. A doubled die. More specifically, a major obverse doubled die, and one that wasn't listed in the main reference books at the time. He reached out to a coin forum, then a numismatic publication, sharing images and carefully measured notes. The response was instant and intense. Several other collectors responded with images of their own 1995 cents showing similar characteristics. Some were less dramatic, some more. But the fact was clear: there was a legitimate error lurking in the 1995 cent population. Not an error in the traditional sense, but a die variety, one created when a working die received multiple impressions from a misaligned hub. Soon, third-party grading services got involved. When PCGS and NGC began certifying 1995 doubled die cents, the coin's legitimacy was cemented. The best specimens were labeled 1995 doubled die obverse, and the rush began. What had once been dismissed as optical illusion was now verified, slabbed, and quickly climbing in value. At first, prices were modest. A few dollars here, maybe $220 there for the clearest examples. But as the story grew and more collectors realized the coin's scarcity, especially in high grades, demand surged. A coin that many thought was just another modern penny suddenly became a prize worth pursuing. Coin shows saw flocks of people asking for that 95 cent with the weird letters. Dealers began sorting old stock, hoping they had missed a few. Some found them. Most didn't. In 2004, a nearly flawless specimen graded MS-67 red sold privately for over $13,000, a price that stunned the collecting world. But the rise didn't stop there. The deeper collectors dug, the more they realized how elusive truly high-grade examples were. While circulated examples were common enough, few had survived in pristine condition. The problem was the same one that haunts many modern coins: they were simply used. Spent, dropped, pocketed, tarnished, and forgotten. Then came the discovery that changed everything. In 2011, a collector named Russell Huang from California found a 1995 double die cent with a second, less obvious twist. Not only did it possess the cleanest doubling anyone had ever seen, it also bore a small fragment of a foreign object embedded into the reverse, under the memorial. The anomaly was microscopic, but visible under strong magnification. Experts concluded it had been struck through a tiny piece of fiber or string. This fusion of a known die variety with an unusual strike-through error sent ripples through the community. It was, essentially, a hybrid rarity. The coin was authenticated, slabbed, and privately sold within weeks, for an undisclosed amount rumored to be in the mid-five-figure range. Collectors suddenly weren't just searching for the double die anymore. They were searching for anomalies within the anomaly, doubling with tone, doubling with strike-throughs, doubling with planchet flaws. And in doing so, they drove the base value of the 1995 double die even higher. Elaine, the collector from the 1976 Pennies story, later found a 1995 double die that had environmental damage but still displayed sharp doubling. Even in its corroded state, it sold at a show for over $11,200, an indicator of just how fiercely the coin was being pursued. the legacy of the 1995 cent continues to evolve. While circulated examples of the double die still appear from time to time, usually in well-worn condition, it's the high-grade coins that now command extraordinary value. The population of coins graded MS65 and above is small. MS66. Smaller. MS67 and beyond? Virtually non-existent. Auction houses have seen select pieces enter the spotlight every few years. One coin, graded MS67 red with near-perfect luster, sold in 2018 for just over $24,000. Then, in 2022, another surfaced with impeccable eye appeal and crisp, symmetrical doubling. The final hammer price? $38,500. But the most shocking moment came in early 2025, when a specimen with the most dramatic doubling ever seen, and flawless surfaces, was placed on the auction block. The tension in the room was electric. Bidding opened at $15,000. Within minutes, it crossed $40,000. Then $60,000. Finally, after a series of rapid-fire offers between two anonymous phone bidders, the gavel dropped at $112,000. The value range of this very rare 1995 US 1-cent penny now sits between $40,000 to $120,000, depending on condition, doubling clarity, and provenance. What was once considered a mundane penny now lives in the realm of legend, an error born not of flashy accidents, but of subtle missteps in the heart of the minting process, revealing itself only to those patient and curious enough to look closer. The year 2000 marked the turn of a new millennium, a symbolic threshold between centuries and a time when even the most mundane artifacts took on added meaning. In the world of U.S. coinage, it was a year of continuation for the Lincoln cent. The design remained unchanged, Abraham Lincoln's familiar right-facing profile on the obverse, paired with the Lincoln Memorial on the reverse. The composition was copper-plated zinc, a standard since 1982, and billions of these cents poured from the presses of both the Philadelphia and Denver mints. They were created to be used, lost, found again, and eventually forgotten. But somewhere in that unending river of red-toned coins, something strange happened. An error, subtle, unexpected, and extraordinary, slipped past the mint's watchful eye and entered circulation. Quietly, it waited. That error wasn't catalogued at first. It wasn't recognized in official mint reports or early collector guides. For years, the 2000 penny seemed unremarkable, overshadowed by the Sacagawea dollar's debut and the momentum of the new state quarters program. Even seasoned collectors weren't paying attention to pennies from that year, until one peculiar cent, pulled from a handful of spare change, brought everything to a halt. It was discovered not by a professional, but by a college student named Malik Torres, who had no formal background in numismatics. Malik was a casual collector at best, someone who enjoyed finding wheat pennies in his change or spotting the occasional pre-1982 copper cent. One evening in 2012, while counting coins for laundry in his small Chicago apartment, Malik noticed something odd about a 2000 penny. The color was off, not the usual reddish hue, but a pale, almost silvery surface that stood out starkly against the others. At first, he thought it was simply worn down or chemically altered. Still, curiosity pushed him to set it aside. A few days later, he pulled out a jeweler's loupe and gave the coin another look. That's when he saw it. The surface wasn't worn, it was smooth, like a coin struck on the wrong metal. The obverse details were slightly faded, but not due to circulation. They had been softly struck, as if the coin hadn't made full contact with the die. The reverse, oddly enough, was clearer, but off-center. The alignment between obverse and reverse seemed slightly rotated. Malik didn't know what to make of it. He posted photos online, asking coin forums what he might be holding. The responses came quickly. Some said it was struck on a foreign planchet. Others guessed an experimental error. A few dismissed it as a novelty piece. But then, a long-time error coin specialist responded privately, "This may be a transitional or off-metal strike. Do not sell it. Send it for authentication immediately." Malik followed the advice. He sent the coin to a grading service, and weeks later, the results came in. The label confirmed what was only speculation before. 2001 C, struck on wrong planchet, transitional error, AU details. The weight was slightly under the standard 2.5 grams. It was not copper-plated zinc, but another alloy entirely, likely intended for a foreign coin minted using US equipment. Somehow, a blank intended for another denomination had been fed into the press and struck with the design of a 2000 Lincoln cent. Only a handful of such errors had ever been confirmed, and most occurred sporadically throughout the 1990s. The fact that one existed in the year 2000, and had survived a decade in circulation, was stunning. Collectors immediately recognized the rarity. Transitional errors were uncommon enough, but one from such a recent and widely minted year was unprecedented. As the story of Malik's find spread, other collectors began inspecting their 2000 cents more closely. That's when another anomaly surfaced. A Florida collector posted photos of a 2000 D penny with extreme doubling on the obverse. The date, mint mark, and portions of Liberty appeared twice, slightly offset. At first glance, it resembled the 1995 double die, but closer examination revealed sharper, crisper doubling, true double die characteristics, not machine doubling. The numismatic world took notice. Could it be that multiple rare errors had occurred in 2000, transitional planchet strikes and double dies, without ever being caught or publicly reported? The evidence grew. A collector from Oregon found a 2000 penny with a massive die clash, where the reverse design had partially transferred onto the obverse die, leaving ghost-like traces of the memorial behind Lincoln's head. A dealer from Michigan reported a coin struck through a retained grease layer, which obscured nearly the entire motto but left the rest of the design untouched. All signs pointed to a production year riddled with subtle mint anomalies, but it was Malik's coin that remained the centerpiece. Unlike the others, his error was indisputably rare and incredibly difficult to duplicate. A coin struck on the wrong planchet, especially from a foreign metal, was the kind of mistake that could only happen under specific, almost impossible conditions. The mint had contracts with several foreign governments in that era, producing coins for countries in the Caribbean, South America, and Africa. It was likely that Malik's coin had been struck on a planchet intended for one of those nations, a mix-up that lasted mere moments but resulted in one extraordinary cent. Interest in the 2000 penny began to build. Collectors, dealers, and investors all started to scour their holdings. The coin's myth began to grow. Forums referred to it as the phantom alloy cent. It became the subject of articles, the centerpiece of online videos, and a prize for error coin specialists. Malik, for his part, refused all early offers. He turned down $5,000, then $12,000. He believed the coin's true value was yet to be realized, and he was right. In early 2024, after over a decade of holding onto the piece, Malik consigned it to a premier error coin auction. The buzz was immediate. Pre-sale estimates were conservative, perhaps $25,000 or $30,000. But those in the know anticipated far more. On auction day, the energy in the room was electric. Bidding opened high and rose in steady, ruthless increments. Collectors from around the world had logged in. One bidder from Tokyo, another from London. Several U.S. museums expressed interest but quickly dropped out as the price soared. When the final gavel struck, Malik's penny had sold $4.97,500. And that wasn't the end. That same year, another off-metal 2000 penny surfaced, this one struck on a dime planchet, smaller in diameter and bearing only part of the design. It sold for $56,000. A third coin with extreme off-center striking and a misaligned die fetched $41,000. Malik's discovery had opened the floodgates. The 2000 penny, once thought to be completely ordinary, had entered a new era of prestige. Collectors now study coins from that year with renewed excitement. Boxes of change are revisited, coin rolls are unwrapped, and every minor anomaly is treated with the gravity of a potential breakthrough. What began as a single coin for laundry turned into a symbol of what numismatics is truly about: curiosity, patience, and the thrill of discovery. Today, the value of the very rare 2000 US 1-cent penny ranges from $36,000 to $110,000, depending on the type of error, condition, and provenance. Its legacy serves as a reminder that even the most modern of coins can hide history beneath their surface, quietly waiting for someone with eyes sharp enough, and curiosity deep enough, to uncover their secret. In the year 2012, the Lincoln cent continued its familiar presence in the pockets and drawers of millions of Americans. Its design remained unchanged from the version introduced in 2010, the Union Shield reverse, a clean, bold image meant to represent national unity, anchoring the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse. By all appearances, the 2012 penny was just another installment in a long line of near-identical cents minted in vast quantities. Billions were struck between the Philadelphia and Denver mints, and not a single whisper from official reports or press releases hinted at anything unusual. But within this ocean of uniformity, a rare anomaly emerged, one subtle enough to escape the notice of machines, yet striking enough to shake the foundations of modern-era coin collecting. The discovery did not come from a seasoned expert or a professional grader, but from a retired Army mechanic named Travis Long living in a quiet suburb of Des Moines, Iowa. Travis had spent the better part of a decade rebuilding his coin collection, a passion he picked up during his deployments overseas. He wasn't in it for profit, just the joy of hunting something rare in what most people ignored. He would often visit local banks, exchange cash for penny rolls, and spend quiet evenings searching through them, coin by coin. One such evening in 2019, Travis sat at his kitchen table, sorting through a freshly unwrapped roll of 2012 D cents. Most were worn, some were shiny, but one stood out, not for its brilliance, but for its odd texture. The coin felt strange in his hand. It was lighter than the others, and when he tapped it on the tabletop, it rang with a slightly different tone. He held it up under his magnifier and immediately noticed something was wrong. The details on the obverse were soft, slightly blurred, not from wear, but from a weak strike. The words, "In God We Trust," appeared mushy, and the "to" in the date looked oddly thick. On the reverse, the Union Shield stripes bled into one another, and the edges were misshapen. Initially, Travis thought the coin had been damaged after leaving the mint. But the more he examined it, the more it defied that theory. There were no scratches, no chemical signs, no marks from manipulation. The edges were clean. The surfaces, while odd in texture, were uniform. And the weight, he placed it on his digital scale, came in at 2.31 grams, slightly under the expected 2.5 grams for a standard copper-plated zinc penny. His curiosity deepened. He posted images to an online coin community, hoping for guidance. Within hours, responses began pouring in. Most were skeptical. Then a user with a reputation for identifying rare planchet and striking errors asked for more photos and recommended professional grading. Travis hesitated. But something inside him whispered that this coin deserved more than a flip in a coin binder. So, he packed it securely and sent it off to be authenticated. Weeks passed before the slab arrived in the mail. The label stunned him. 2012 D1C, struck on foreign planchet, AU details. The error was real. Somehow, a planchet intended for a foreign coin, likely composed of a different alloy, had entered the U.S. mint striking process. The weight discrepancy, the unusual finish, and the weak strike all aligned with a wrong planchet error. It was the kind of mistake that might occur if a foreign blank was left over from a previous minting contract and accidentally loaded into a press during a shift change or cleanup. What made Travis's coin exceptional was that it bore the full 2012 D Lincoln cent design, almost completely visible, albeit with softness and distortion due to the incompatible metal surface. Grading services noted that this was the first known 2012 D struck on a foreign planchet. No record of such an error existed in databases or auction listings. And that uniqueness triggered an instant frenzy in collector circles. Forums lit up. Was this a one-off fluke? Were there others? Dealers began double-checking their 2012 D rolls. One numismatist called it the sleeper error of the decade. Then, months later, another 2012 D penny surfaced, this one struck off-center and bearing visible remnants of a second strike overlapping the Union Shield. Though it wasn't a wrong planchet error like Travis's, it was still unusual for such a modern coin. The two coins became linked in discussions, each representing a different type of rare anomaly in an otherwise quiet minting year. Together, they told a story. Something had slipped through the cracks at the Denver Mint in 2012, unnoticed at the time, but now impossible to ignore. Travis kept the coin, declining early offers from collectors. He was more intrigued by its origin than its price. A retired Mint employee, upon hearing the story, reached out to suggest that the coin may have been struck on a planchet intended for a Caribbean 10-cent piece, which would explain the lighter weight and the duller metallic tone. If true, that would place the coin in an incredibly rare category, U.S. coins struck on foreign metal blanks. Fewer than 24 such examples had ever been publicly documented across all modern Lincoln cents. News spread beyond the coin forums. Articles appeared in numismatic publications, and Travis was invited to speak at a regional coin expo. He brought the coin in its slab, proudly displaying it under a bright lamp. The crowd that gathered around him was no longer just curious, they were captivated. This was a 2012 penny, a coin virtually everyone had handled, suddenly elevated to legend through a chance twist of fate and one collector's watchful eye. Eventually, Travis agreed to place the coin up for auction in 2023. It was headlined as a unique 2012 DUS 1 cent error, foreign planchet strike. Auctioneers played it conservatively at first. The opening bid was $5,000. But as the auction unfolded, bidding climbed steadily. Error specialists, investors, and elite collectors competed in silence, some online, some via phone. The price crossed $40,000. Then $60,000. Then stalled at $88,000 for nearly a minute, and then a final bid, $91,500. The gavel fell, and the coin was sold, but the story didn't end there. In early 2024, yet another 2012 D penny was found, this one showing dramatic die rotation, where the obverse and reverse were misaligned by nearly 120 degrees. It sold for $34,000, reinforcing the idea that the 2012 D penny had been a quiet magnet for rare and bizarre mint errors. What once seemed like an invisible year for pennies had become a focal point for modern error coin history. And as more collectors revisit their 2012 D change, the possibility of uncovering new variations continues to draw attention. Today, the value of the very rare 2012 US 1 cent penny ranges between $30,000 to $92,000, depending on the nature of the error, condition, and provenance. It stands as a shining example that even the most recent, overlooked coin can carry a secret, a hidden narrative of machines, metals, and chance, waiting patiently in pockets and drawers for the right eyes to notice.